done and we can make a start?
Yes, please.
Lovely.
Thank you. We are broadcasting the meeting now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks. Naswazar Pawb, and welcome to this meeting of the Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 21st of January 2026. Can I first hand over to Liz for some housekeeping?
Thank you, Chair. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording will be archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand using the remote raise hand function? When invited to address by the Chair, please could all participants use the request to speak button at the bottom of their screen and ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. That's the housekeeping, Chair, but if I may, I also have a very brief reminder to give to committee tonight. Committee may be aware that we also have biannual updates regarding the request for consideration process and the call-in process that can be used by committee members. So it's just to give a really brief reminder that both of these processes, both request for consideration and call-in for cabinet decisions, the forms that would need to be used for both of these processes can be found on MemberNet and under the Scrutiny Hub part of MemberNet for making those requests. So if anyone wants to get any more information on using either of these processes at Scrutiny, please do let me know. If you want to drop me an email, we can go through it, but there's also more information in section 7 of the Constitution. So hopefully that's enough of a reminder for everybody, but do get in touch if anyone would like any more information. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you. So welcome everyone, I'm Ewan Goodjohn, I'm the Vice Chair, standing in the absence of the Chair. If I can move to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Other than that of Councillor Prothero, have we got any?
No others have been submitted. I'm so sorry to interrupt there, Chair. I was just going to say no others have been submitted to me in advance.
No problem. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fisher will be joining us, but he may be slightly late, so if he isn't on the call as yet, he will be very soon.
Thank you, Councillor. Barring any others, we'll move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November. Can we take these as a true and accurate record? I don't see any problems. I'll take a mover and a seconder. Councillor Goodjohn, Councillor Emma Goodjohn, and Councillor Wood. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to declarations of interest and any nature to such interest. Have we got any declarations? No?
None to us either, Chair.
That's fine. Okay, we'll move to item 4, the Q2 Revenue Monitoring Report. I believe that Matt Bomer is going to take us through this one. Over to you.
Right. Evening, everyone. So this is Q2 Revenue Monitoring, so our half-year position, and this was reported to Cabinet at the end of November. It's a fairly familiar story. So the monitoring position reflects continued pressure across particularly our schools, social services, and that's more children and young people than adults on this occasion. There is a lag in the delivery of savings that is disappointing, and as well as those headline pressures, we are experiencing pressures on some of our other frontline services such as street lighting, energy costs, and road maintenance. The report does also project unplanned use of reserves corporately of £3 million. £2 million of that we'd provided for to some extent, and that we've put money aside in a budget risk reserve. But there's also 320k set aside from the housing, rehome and homelessness reserve, and the balance is currently then shown against the general fund. Obviously, we need to keep the general fund at its policy level, So there'll be more work to do in that in the next couple of quarters. There are a number of reshaping proposals that have been explored during 2025-6 to address the unplanned use of reserves. We have a moratorium on the use of reserves in a year that's been introduced by the senior leadership team. There's a review of planned use of reserves planned, and also SLT looking at all recruitment requests at the moment as well. So whilst there's been a slight improvement in the schools outturn position quarter 2, that drawdown still amounts to £11 million in this report, and that's building up a significant cumulative deficit. It is of concern. The council has generally sought to maximise the resources in schools, but in 2024-5 ended up with a £4.2 million deficit, and further deficits are forecast in the current year. It is the case that there are acknowledged funding pressures for schools across Wales. So this is the case for the Vale of Glamorgan too. But the specific issue that's facing us and challenging us are the small number of schools with disproportionate levels of deficit. Greater actions being taken in 25-6 to address the position, including providing schools with strategies to present balanced recovery plans. Some of that work's been stepped up in the early autumn. The Director of Learning Skills has worked with schools and governing bodies to develop plans to address deficits, and a number of those schools with higher recoverable deficits have been meeting regularly with the Director. On top of that, the Director of Learning Skills, the Chief Exec, myself and the lead have been meeting across the autumn as well to look at measures to address the position. Further support is being provided to schools too with smaller deficits to support delivery of recovery plans as agreed with the Director of Learning Skills. It's fair to say this is naturally a stressful time and position for all concerned, and there has been wellbeing support for our schools and especially the leadership staff from HR. The position is of such a concern that a briefing was sent out to all members last week. There was a session earlier this week at Startwell on the school's position, and they've requested a report presentation to their next meeting, and that same report presentation will also come here at our next meeting in March. We will have a more up-to-date position at that time, and certainly a lot more clarity on the full range of grants that should be coming schools' way, even this late in the year, and a more accurate forecast of the outturn position at that time. The lag on delivery savings, as I mentioned at the outset, is quite significant and outstrips the provision in the budget reserve, and that to some extent reflects the complexity of some of the savings we're attempting to deliver, and also the year-on-year impact of £7 and £8 million savings programmes. There's been some varments requests as part of this report, and they reflect the correction of the allocation of cost pressures and savings in the budget setting process in the main. The projections also include the changes requested as part of the HRA report that was also on the 20th of November Cabinet agenda. The progress against the savings is reflected in Appendix 9. This a full detailed disclosure on where we are. Services mitigated some of those savings not achieved in year with temporary income or other savings, and that appendix also picks up historical savings that weren't achieved in 23-4 and 24-5 under review as well. The level of usable reserves is projected to reduce significantly in year to just under £40 million, but it is likely to be reprofiled slightly due to capital expenditure slippage that I'll talk about in the next agenda item, and also the potential for emerging grant income. Obviously, at this time, we're working on the Q3 revenue monitoring report. That's going to come to Cabinet on the 26th of February. We are seeing some improvements on those headline pressures of schools transport, children's social care, and also adults. So that's positive. Some of those measures that we'd perhaps be employing in the latter parts of the year, such as investment income, upside on internal borrowing, for example. Some of those we've already played into the Q2 report. So I'm not necessarily optimistic of more coming from that. We're obviously continuing to review our council tax receipts, and those are in good order. So we might see some of that coming through in Q3 as well. And also, I'd expect to see some improvement in the school's position. There's been some free school meals money coming through, additional pay grants in year as well, and there are other grants in the pipeline that we're expecting to come through. So that's all I was planning to say in introduction, and as ever, I'm more than happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Matt. Bearing in mind that we're going to have a more in-depth view at the school budgets in March alongside Governance and Audit and Startwell Committee, I'll take any questions and comments. I'll start with Councillor Dr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Matt. I understand. Is the translator here? Matt looked a little bit confused, so I just wanted to make sure that he could hear the translation. Thank you very much for the presentation, Matt. This is obviously taking us up to the end of the second quarter, so the end of September, and we are now to access the translation. So if you come to the screen and then select, oh, sorry, Dr. Johnson, again. Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Matt. Hopefully he can now hear me, because it's difficult to respond if you don't hear the translation. So I started by saying that this is a report taking us up to the end of the second quarter of the year, so the end of September, so about 4 months ago, and we're now close to the end of the financial year. So we need to be looking at a timetable in terms of the scrutiny timetable, because there's not much that can be done now apart from asking questions about the matters at hand. So the main thing I have is obviously I was sitting in the committee on Monday to discuss the school reserves and budgets and how this is impacting. And my question is, what is the end game for us as a council? Obviously, hopefully, the amount will be less by the end of the financial year than perhaps we anticipated at the end of the second quarter, but it still will be a substantial sum. Will this roll over until the next financial year, until we reach some point where there is a balanced budget at some point in the future? Can Matt tell us a little bit more about financial pressures in relation to children and young people? and whether there's anything that can be done in this regard in social care, and also a little bit more about some of the pressures in relation to neighbourhood and transport pressures. In particular, there's mention in the report in relation to lighting, street lighting and so forth. What is the issue there? And the last point I wanted to make, Chair, or Vice Chair, is could Matt explain, he mentioned earlier in relation, in the presentation, in relation to the reserves moratorium, perhaps I didn't fully understand exactly what the suggestion was. Is he saying that we won't use reserves, or we can't dip into it more? Could Matt explain a little bit more on that point? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Matt, I hope you heard all that.
Yeah, I did. Thank you very much, and obviously worked turning my screen off. Thank you. So the school's position is, and I don't really need to say this, do I? Is very challenging, and it's going to take us a couple of years to or more to resolve it now, especially with the those 10 schools with the disproportionate deficits. Quite clearly, deficits of that stage aren't going to be resolved in a single or 2 or 3 years when you look at them in proportion to the actual annual budget allocations. So the strategy is to actually get them on an even foot in year, so they aren't building up further deficit. That's the initial, and then to gradually turn those deficits round. It's going to take a huge amount of effort on all concerned. The social care, we do quite extensive benchmarking at the time when we're setting the budget with other local authorities. We do have a relatively low spending children's social care service, but we are sort of being faced with some volatility in that area at the moment, and it just takes 1 or 2 high cost cases to have quite significant financial impact. The street lighting, that's been the pressures there have been around the energy costs, and we have that under continual review. And then on the reserves moratorium, we should perhaps be a little bit more careful with the language. So there's not 100% moratorium on them, but what we have done is up the governance arrangements on them. So we do have a detailed schedule of all those reserves, and each reserve there is a sort of scheme of delegation for their release, typically with the relevant appropriate director, but some such as the with me as well. So at the moment, we're bypassing those delegations, and any requests for the release of reserves needs to come through the senior leadership team. So I hope that's answered your questions, but certainly if you want more detail above what's in the report on the children's social care issue at all, I'm sure I can pick that up with the relevant officers and get you a more detailed response. Thank you.
Okay, right. Diolch yn fawr, Matt.
Thank you. I've spoken to Rachel, so I'm sure there's nothing else new there. Thank you.
Thank you both. I'm going to turn to Councillor Carroll now.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I have a few questions in relation to the school deficits, and at this point I will declare an interest as a local authority governor. Of the total deficit balances of 16.6 million. Matt referred to the 10 schools that have a disproportionately high deficit. I think the total there amounts to around 10 million, if I read the report correctly. Is there a common theme across those 10 schools as to the reasons for their overspends? I.e., are they all typically within the same area, perhaps staffing, salary costs, building repairs? Is there a common theme there, or are they very unique to each individual school, those reasons for that overspend?
I think the simple answer is that there aren't totally common issues across all of them, but there is a contrast between those schools and similar schools with similar demographics and populations elsewhere across our schools sector, who are in certainly a better financial position, albeit we do understand the overall challenges that our schools are facing, and same as delivering council services, none of our schools are necessarily finding it easy to balance their budgets at this time.
No, I completely understand and agree with that. I mean, I think that there are issues with underfunding of schools as a result of the funding settlement. I mean, it's something that I've raised for a long time. It's a point really, just because the focus seems to have been on these 10 schools, and the council has been quite frank that they have disproportionate deficits in comparison with their counterparts. So what would the most common reason of overspend be? Would it be staffing costs, or would it be repairs? I'm just trying to get an idea. When large amounts of money like this, my personal instinct is that the schools aren't to blame. I think that as a school governor myself, I understand the pressures that schools are under, but it's difficult for us to scrutinise without having details as to what's the cause of the overspend in the first place, rather than just being told there's an overspend, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So over 90% of school spend is on staffing costs. So that's the obvious place to be looking. But there'll be a mixture of costs, and some of the work that the Learning in Schools team have been doing with schools around their procurement, and looking at the supplies and services costs as well. So there will be across the piece, but predominantly they are going to be around staffing costs.
If I may interrupt very briefly, just to say that we are going to have a full detailed report on this in March, and Matt can answer to the best of his ability, but that's all the information we have at the moment.
No, I appreciate that, Chair, and I will revisit this in March. If we could have a breakdown at that meeting per school, so that we can at least identify trends if they exist, or perhaps delve deeper into figures that need to be, that would be much appreciated, because my own personal view is that it's likely, having seen those figures, that it's probably going to be a funding issue from the top, i.e. Welsh Government, but it's important that we have access to those figures to be able to provide the necessary scrutiny and draw the correct conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. And just in the future, when people are making declarations, just a reminder to state if they're personal, prejudicial, the nature, and the item if we're not already in the item, and to try and do so at the start of the meeting. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Matt. I appreciate some of the elements of your report will be dealt with in further sections. I just wanted to I appreciate the fact, and thank you, Vice Chair, for clarifying that there is going to be an in-depth report, and like Councillor Ian Johnson, I want to ensure that we have as much information as possible to be able to give as much support as possible because as a council, we're not in the habit of pointing fingers, and I don't want to start going down that road. And giving personal opinions at that stage isn't helpful. There's just 2 points that I would want to ensure that if you could pass on to officers, that we include in the March report, and that is in Appendix 3, the statement is a number of transformational proposals are being developed to the area of education transport, taking into consideration the critical sort of factor that's been referenced in this report, is that with the increase in additional learning needs, there comes with it the parental sort of right to request specific transport, and normally because of behaviours, that transport is normally on a one-to-one basis, so that will incur the cost. But if we could have information on what does a transformational proposal mean, if you could pass that on to officers so that we have as much information as possible. And then further on, it's not got a page reference, you'll have to forgive me, but it's Appendix 7, and it's to do with translation services. Again, could we get some clarity on adopt Amazon translation services? I've not seen, and forgive me if this has passed me by, but can you clarify if it's the Amazon translate in terms of the services we use, or if it's another organisation that I'm not aware of? It's just, as you can appreciate, personal opinion of Amazon is not necessarily a strong one. So that would be really useful. Thank you, Matt.
So the with this school's transport transformation, we'll bring the further detail forward in March. Indeed, if I'll speak to colleagues and see if there's something we could provide in the meantime. On the Amazon translation service, my understanding there is that Amazon, and if I'm incorrect, I'll send a note round confirming that. But my understanding that it is Amazon.
Thank you, Matt. Any follow-up? No, it's absolutely fine. No, that's fine. Okay, I just had one point to make myself, if I may, Matt, just around the impact on residents' RAG rating. Could we get some information sent round as to how that's being decided? Just because I think some of this would be definitely up for debate as to why they've been designated Reg Amber Green, and it would just be interesting as to the thought process as to how that's being allocated on the savings in the report. I hope that's all right. Something you probably can't answer right now, but some information afterwards would be helpful.
Councillor Goodjohn, I'm not sure if it's my connection or yours, but that was it was you were breaking up a bit. Would you be able to repeat what you said? Sorry.
Yeah, just the impact on residents' RAG rating. If we could get some more information after the meeting as to how that's been decided, that would be helpful. Hopefully you got that.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll do that. Thank you.
I don't believe we have any recommendations for Cabinet. If anyone disagrees, they're welcome to shout now. But barring that, I'll recommend that we note the item, and that's it. Yes, are we happy to move? Can I get a...
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, Bell's moving. I'll second if no one else will. Okay. No dissent? Okay, we will move on to the capital monitoring report.
Thank you. So similarly, this capital monitoring report also went to Cabinet on the 20th of November, and it provides us with the half-year position. So the position up to the 30th of September. At the time of writing, we still had quite a significant, possibly overly ambitious capital programme, £128 million. If all the requests in the report to amend the capital programme approve, the revised forecast outturn projection is £98 million. So still somewhat in excess of the spend against capital programme last couple of years. Appendix 1 details financial progress on the programme scheme by scheme, and Appendix 2 sets it out by directorate. The changes sets out the changes on a directorate basis since the approved budget was agreed by council back in March. So that's for movements in year, including slippage, additions. So it gives you the full trail of where we stand with the programme at the current time. Appendix 1, which is a new development that we've put in this year, continues. So that's we're identifying schemes over 250k. We're risk rating them, so they're coloured green, amber and red to indicate the level of risk, where the green is the lowest and red the highest. And that categorisation is detailed in the report then. Schemes are being closely monitored through the year to identify overspends, and obviously, as we've set out, slippage of some £27 million has been requested in the half-year report. Report also sets out all the recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of any emergency powers as well, and those are detailed in Appendix 1. We've highlighted that we normally do a couple of schemes in the programme of note, and these are the Shared Prosperity Fund grant for a youth bus, relatively small sum, but will make a significant difference to that service, and also the Welsh Government grant for empty homes. The report does make several amendments to the current capital programme, and some of the larger ones are in respect of the inclusion of scheme to deliver lighting at Barry Island for 100k, and we've also removed the non-treasury investment budget from the 25-6 to 29-30 capital programme. We'll bring that back in as necessary should any business cases come forward. There are further requests in the 25-6 capital programme to reflect the revised lease arrangements that are due to commence in 25-6 that meet the threshold for inclusion under the new reporting international finance reporting standard. Similarly to revenue, we're obviously undertaking work on the Q3 report, and some sort of broad heads up on that, where naturally we continue to focus on the large school schemes and those, ragged red on deliverability. For example, St Richard Gwyn's scheme, there have been delays, but that's now on site since October 25. We've had some delays on the levelling up monies and works, and that's been due to extensive survey work and due diligence that's been necessary. Vehicle replacement, the lead times have been greater than anticipated. I suspect there'll be some further slippage on that. There've been some delays on fleet parking, and that's been around planning to put the EV infrastructure in place. Penarth Marina, there's been quite extended procurement activity on that and negotiations, which aren't wholly surprising given the sums of money involved. St Joseph's, we're now on site. Housing improvements, this report reports some slippage. I expect there'll be some more in Q3. And on the 20 mile an hour monies, can update that there's anticipated that we have £1 million spent by year end now. So that's all I was going to say in terms of introduction of the capital report. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions or comments? Councillor Franks.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I'd like to say I'm a bit disappointed that the report only goes up to September, and now we're in January, and I think it's reasonable to say why there can't be a more up-to-date report on these matters. But there you are. I would particularly like to ask the Cabinet member to detail why so much has not been spent. The money's been allocated. We had the budget debate, and even so, £27 million is, shall I use the word lying idle in the Vale bank accounts. And some of the big ticket issues are quite breathtaking. 1.4 million for vehicle purchase, but Barry Island lighting, coast protection, £100,000. Dinas Powys flood scheme, £1.2 million. And I would mention here, an awful lot of properties still have not been protected, even though the money is available. Though I understand part of that could be involvement with the government. The never-ending saga of the Windsor Road wall, £250,000 unspent. It's a dreadful advert for the town. You come in the main road into Penarth, and you see these dreadful white bags holding up the cliff, and that's been going on for years. I don't fully understand the fleet parking, 1.5 million, but no doubt someone will tell me. But then we come to new build, £6 million. How can we slip £6 million in a year? And then levelling up, £10 million. Now, I know there's been a complication because of the withdrawal of the marina, but even so, the economy of the Vale is crying out for investment, and we've got £27 million not being invested in our local economy. So I am struggling, and I've got to ask, if there is no reasonable prospect of these schemes going ahead at the start of the financial year, why are they in the budget when there's other projects that could well be progressed? And I think the public ask, if projects are on hold, why can't our roads receive additional capital investment? Before anyone says, oh, that's revenue, you can capitalise it. Going around the Vale, it looks as though the highway network is in a state of collapse. So I just question, are we as an authority nimble enough to be able to identify delays and divert funding to very urgent matters? And to conclude, I suggest that we advise Cabinet about our dissatisfaction with the state of the capital budget, and ask how matters can be improved to avoid such huge delays in future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. If I take them one by one, so questions to Councillor Burnett. So I'll call Councillor Burnett in, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm a bit stunned here, if I'm blunt. In the report, the all those bullet points that you see are actually all detailed in terms of exactly what it is. And when you look at the amount of work, as Matt said right at the start, this is a hugely ambitious programme. And there's going to be some slippage. I mean, we know that every year there's slippage at the end of the financial year, purely and simply because of school holidays. But if you look at things like the retaining wall in Windsor Road, yes, we all know about that very much. But when you first see cracks, you have to work out, is that a substantial issue? Is it something that can be solved easily? Then you have to look at whether or not you've got the money. And the question came up, do we have the money? And at what point do we actually decide that if it needs to be done, and we will borrow for it? Now, if the programme doesn't go ahead, actually, we haven't borrowed yet, have we? So you'll see outcomes from that in the Treasury management thing. I am stunned, Councillor Franks. How long have you been a member? You are fully aware of these reports. And if you want me to go through each one in detail, I'm quite happy to. But actually, this is a fairly brief, fairly straightforward report that there will be an update on shortly. You asked why this takes so long to come. The scrutiny committees meet every 2 months, so this would have gone up to September. By the time it is ready, we are into Christmas at this time of year. It's come at the first scrutiny after that. So I should imagine that the Q3 report will come fairly soon after it's ready, potentially with the next meeting. But when you look at the future capital reports as well, you will see as detailed an outcome for those as well. So, you know, if you want a detailed report, if you read past the first couple of pages, you will see it from paragraph 2.3 on, that goes through everything that has been achieved, everything that where there are some slight glitches. And if you also had read in parallel the cabinet report in terms of revenue budget, that also talks about the pressures on experienced project managers. So we actually do need to make ourselves more resilient for that in order to have the staff to support these. But there are so many different reasons that come to this. And I said, if you want a separate briefing, I'm sure we can manage it. But within the report, there are details of every single one. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Any follow-up, Councillor Franks? Put your hand up, so I'm assuming you want to raise something else. Councillor Franks?
I'm sorry, press the wrong button. I was apologising if I'd stunned the leader. That wasn't my intention. Well, the simple thing is, this information is before us. It is for discussion tonight. Trying to palm me off on another meeting, another place. This is the time to ask questions and, quite bluntly, to get answers. So the leader offered to go through my points one by one. I will accept her kind offer, and I'm sure the committee will be pleased to hear her words. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. Thank you, Councillor Franks. Councillor Burnett?
I just wanted to come in and say I wasn't aware, with the exception of Windsor Road, which the work is currently being done to look at the full scale and what is needed, that any specifics were actually mentioned. If Councillor Franks would like to go into specifics, we can find the relevant paragraph that deals with it within the report, and then we can discuss it. But when it's just sort of broad brush, oh, there's slippage. Well, there always will be slippage, but you definitely won't deliver a scheme if you don't put it in the plan to start off with. And we are going to discuss the first part of the capital proposals for next year in a report later on this agenda, which will be coming as for consultation at a subsequent scrutiny meeting. So we can go through all that then, and certainly we said when the next capital management report or monitoring report comes through, there'll be even more details that we can discuss. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Councillor Franks, would you like any follow-up? Go ahead.
Yes. Well, I've asked for further details. They're not forthcoming, so it looks as though me the rest of the committee and the rest of the Vale will have to remain in the dark until such time we get more information. So thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt.
Fine. Would anyone else like to ask any questions or comments?
Chair, could I just say that if Councillor Franks provides any specific questions, they can be answered. The only specific questions that were asked were answered. I can't guess. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I'll just pick one. There's £10 million of the Levelling Up Fund that is sitting there doing nothing. When will we have substantial details regarding the spending of that £10 million and on what projects? Thank you.
Either Matt or Councillor Burnett.
Could I just come with a general point first?
Sure.
It's just around the flexibility around moving money around the programme. And it's just to remind colleagues that that is limited. The majority of our programme is funded through specific grants for specific schemes. There's very little in the way of general capital grant to support the programme. On the levelling up, there have been certainly delays at a UK level that were around the time that we were setting up the programme when we were building it up at this time last year. And I did talk briefly in my introduction about some of the delays that have happened subsequently. There's been extensive survey work on the mole, and those are being priced up and looked at the moment. And that's the one of the key components of our levelling up bid. Obviously, the others are the Ocean Water Centre and the business hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Did Councillor Burnett have anything to add to that?
Only that I will dig out the details and ask the democratic officers to circulate it. And there was actually a fairly recent levelling up report that went into that stuff. And as I said, we're requesting to carry it forward. That fits in with the timings of the report.
Thank you both. In that case, I'll move on to Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'll start repeating myself and then Councillor Franks in terms of talking about the time between the second quarter and the current period. This is a result of changes in the way we carry out scrutiny, having meetings every other month as opposed to monthly. And so we have to wait longer, but nonetheless, there's a couple of things that I would like to raise, not so dissimilar to what Councillor Franks has raised. In the appendix, there are a number of headings with a red alongside them, and I'd like to get a little bit of information. There's a paragraph in the report, of course, but I would like a little bit more elaboration on what is available. I'm going to read. I know I've read the report, but I'm trying to get more information. So specifically talking here about the parking and the vehicle replacement poking, the float parking, vehicle replacement poking, something to consider in terms of the optimism within the budget this year if it wasn't actually possible to achieve in year. I'd also like to, similarly to Councillor Chris and Franks, the spending on housing in the hands of the council 9 million has been spent, so 6 million in the budget unspent. Is there a reason behind this? It would also be good if Matt could explain a little bit more about something that's been taken out of the pipeline schemes, so the non-treasury investment strategy, and why this has been taken out entirely from the next 4 years. If there could be an explanation of this. And just very quickly, 2 points which perhaps contradict one another, but one, sometimes it's difficult when we read the report to know exactly what we're talking about if there's not a next town next to it. So there are some schemes, old, whole, new era. I don't know which town or village this is in, and also there's something about improvements to the junction in St. Peter's Road. I don't know which St. Peter's we're talking about. So if it would be possible to have this included in the details, that would be very helpful for me when I'm reading it. And as I said, a little bit contradictory to what I've just said, but there is some mention, there's some references specifically which perhaps may be a bit problematic in terms of promoting these by social care department. Perhaps there shouldn't be specific references, just street, not further detail in terms of addresses. So just a couple of comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Matt, would you like to respond to any of those?
Yep. So on the housing, I'll liaise with Mike Ingham and team, and we'll provide some detail about which particular areas of the housing development programme have slipped and give you some more update on timing of those. So I'll pick that up. The fleet parking, I think I mentioned some delays due to planning requirements around the EV infrastructure. I don't know if that was sufficient to answer your question, Councillor Johnson. The non-treasury investment strategy, we bought an non-treasury investment strategy to Cabinet best part of 2.5 years ago now. There have been no business cases coming forward to access that strategy at the moment, and what we didn't want to be doing was continually slipping that, so we've taken it out for the moment. If it needs to come back in, it will. And then, yes, of course, I totally take your point on just having street names. Street names appear in multiple towns, don't they? So I'll speak to the team. They shouldn't have any problem with that, putting town names in. And yes, we'll obviously be sensitive and more mindful where they're in the social care area. Thank you.
Would you like any follow-up?
Yeah, just
Just really quickly, is there a reason why there's no business case for the non-treasury investment strategy? I'm sure there was a intention behind the strategy in the first place, so is there a reason why nobody's come up with an idea for reuse? Its use.
Matt, please.
Yeah, this is partly speculation, but I would suggest that certainly in the replace and regeneration area, there've been quite a number of UK and Welsh initiatives in place, and actually the team are obviously focused on taking those forward at the moment, and some of those ambitions probably chime with some of the stuff that was in the non-treasury investment strategy itself in any case.
Thank you, Matt. Unless there's any follow-up? No? Okay. In that case, we'll move to recommendations. Councillor Franks, can I ask if you wanted to move your point as a formal recommendation that you mentioned earlier?
Thank you. Can I just get my paper?
Yes, of course.
Sorry. I would propose that we advise Cabinet of committee's dissatisfaction with the huge delays in so many schemes, and urge that measures be put in place to reduce such delays in future years. Thank you.
Okay, can we get a seconder for that? Councillor Johnson is seconding. Okay. Would anyone like to debate that recommendation? Because I'm personally not satisfied that, based on the slippage that we're seeing, considering the portion of it that's regarding the non-treasury investment strategy, alongside the marina, which is not really, it's a bigger issue than that of the capital programme. I'm not satisfied there's been significant enough slippage to raise dissatisfaction with Cabinet myself, and that's an opinion. Additionally, I'd note that it's really good that we see slippage rather than it all coming to the final quarter. If we're identifying it earlier, then that's better at setting better expectations for ourselves. So those are the points I would raise. So I would ask that we vote on the recommendation rather than agreeing it by unanimity. If anyone else would like to make any comments on the recommendation, they're welcome to. Councillor Leatherbuck-Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased. You'll have to forgive me for this, but if Councillor Franks could give some more clarity on his ask, so that I'm perfectly clear on what's been asked of me to vote on in terms of recommendations, because I'm noting the document, and I'm noting as well that if some of the queries that he initially raised, I've read through, and there are some explanations as to why there's been elements of slippage. So if he could clarify for me, so I understand what is the ask from us tonight that he's putting forward before we take a vote, because my understanding is from this document, it gives enough information for us to be able to follow the recommendations that it sets out for now, on the clear understanding that it's as we've already noted, it's a retrospective sort of in some elements. But forgive me if I've misunderstood some what Councillor Franks is asking, and if he could give some clarity to help me, that would be really useful. Thank you.
What I'll do is I'll bring in Councillor Carroll first, and then we'll go to Councillor Franks at the end. So, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to indicate that I would be happy to support the recommendation. I mean, there are explanations for some elements of the slippage provided, but I think that it doesn't hurt to make clear that we want to see projects delivered in a timely manner, and a recommendation that measures be put in place to try and assist in that happening is, I think, sensible, and I would be happy to offer it my support.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Franks. You're welcome to respond to Councillor Leatherbuck-Edwards. Thank you.
Okay, well, always pleased to help a fellow councillor. Basically, I am suggesting that we should raise with the Cabinet our concerns about the substantial slippage, £27 million, and invite Cabinet to find ways to ensure that such huge sums are not repeated in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. If everyone is happy with their understanding of what we're voting on, and no one else has any other comments, then I'm happy to take us to a vote on this recommendation to Cabinet. Councillor Lovelock Edwards, just before we continue.
If I may, Vice Chair, and I've got a concern, and it stems both from what Councillor Carroll has said in terms of measures in place. I think that it's too vague. So unless I can see something specific in terms of measures that are practical and that are helpful, then I won't be sort of supporting this. And to go back to Councillor Frank's last comment, future years, I'm not Mystic Meg by any stretch, so I wouldn't want to align myself or agree to something that is going to commit us to future years where we've already seen the upheaval and what's going on a global scale is having a massive impact on us as a local authority. So I'd be a bit cautious on sort of agreeing or accepting that as a recommendation. And substantial slippage. Again, the only point I would make going forward is that it's been explained in the document, and that's all I would need to say on that. Sorry if I've muddied the waters, Councillor Franks, then getting clarity.
You have a little bit, but there you are.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Just to make a really quick point, of course, as a scrutiny committee, we are entitled to and we need to raise a point if we're not entirely happy with something in front of us. We can't settle for good when we can do better. There's a slippage of £27 million between now the situation at the end of Q2 in comparison to where we expect it to be. This is over 20%. I've asked a question earlier on the new housing. People are telling me all the time how important it is to build new council housing, and I haven't had an explanation of why that 6 million hasn't been spent. So it is important that we have an understanding and explanation. And I do think as well, it's something's quite big or big discrepancy in comparison to where we expect it to be. We should raise this with Cabinet so this can be drawn to their consideration to see if there's anything else that can be done.
Okay, Councillor Campbell.
I'm sorry, and I don't want to keep going over this point again, but are we looking for an explanation as to why this has happened, or are we looking for measures to be put in place to make sure that this is not going to happen again? Because these are two quite different things. So I just want to make 100% sure that what we are actually voting on, please.
Councillor Franks, you're welcome to clarify.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Basically, I'd like measures put in place, actions taken to prevent such huge underspend on vital projects. I don't know what more I can say than that. I hope it's helpful.
Okay. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, it's just to make one further point in context as to why I will be supporting this recommendation. It's been alluded to this evening that there's sufficient explanation as to the reasons for these underspend within the report. But if I just cite one example, paragraph 2.28, Penarth Marina landslip slope stabilisation works. Now, it identifies a timescale. It says that the tender documents were published on Sale to Wales in September. Tender submissions were due to be returned in early November. It is therefore unlikely any significant works will be undertaken until the next calendar year. It doesn't tell us whether that took place according to timescale whether that was the planned timescale, whether there was a delay that caused that to be tendered after was initially planned. And the reason I raise this is because clearly, if that was the intended timescale from the outset, then that would suggest that it was never going to be feasible to deliver that project within the financial year. We don't have sufficient details within the report to be able to draw a conclusion from that. So I think that Councillor Frank's recommendation was quite general. It was to suggest that measures be put in place to mitigate potential slippage, or even measures being considered to mitigate potential slippage. Obviously, slippage can't be eliminated completely, mainly because often it is the result of circumstances outside the authority's control in some instances. But where better planning or perhaps stronger levels of engagement with other outside bodies could enable projects to be delivered to time, then I think work should be done to make that happen. So I think, yes, it was a rather general point, but it's a general point that should be considered by Cabinet. I don't quite understand the reluctance to pass that back.
I'd just say as a response to hopefully to finish the debate, my reluctance is that over half of the slippage that's being discussed are made of two items, one of which is the marina, which is an entirely separate issue to us not investing purposely. That's a much bigger issue, and the non-treasury capital investment, which, as we've mentioned before, isn't exactly a planned piece of work that was already agreed and ready to go that we've slipped on. That was a general point, some money in the capital budget that was ready to go in case any business plans were brought before Cabinet. So my point would be that when you say it's 20% of the capital budget, this is the most ambitious capital budget we've ever had, and over half of that slippage, I would say it'd be unfair to call normal slippage in the general term. That's my reluctance, at least. Okay, if everyone's happy, we will move to a vote on the matter, and we can decide whether to send it back to Cabinet or not.
Chair, I was only going to interject just to say we may need 1 or 2 moments just to prepare the vote.
It's okay. I've got it ready, Liz. I just bear in mind that the wording isn't what will come out in the actual minutes. So just remember, all the members understand what they're voting on. I'll start the vote now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Just to confirm that voting for is voting for Councillor Franks's recommendation, yes?
Correct. Okay, Chair, the results on screen and it's fallen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Okay, in that case, if the recommendation has fallen, then I'll move that we note the report and we don't have any recommendations to send to Cabinet. Can I get a hand to move? Councillor Drake and Councillor Emma Goodjohn. Thank you. Barring any dissent, we'll move on. Thank you all. Can I move back to Matt then for the draft capital investment strategy for 26 to 27 to 2030, 31?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Last of my 3 reports this evening. This report sets out the Council's proposed draft capital strategy for 26-27, and that's detailed in Appendix 1, and that sets out the initial capital proposals for the 5-year period out to 2030-31, and that's found in Appendix 2. The capital strategy does look at the longer term view of the capital's investment requirements and outlines the various strategies which identify the priority areas for capital investment and external factors that result in the need to incur our capital expenditure. And obviously some of that's very relevant to the discussion we've just had about the current capital programme that we're doing our very best to deliver. Council is certainly facing significant pressures in relation to price inflation, which continues to see increases in costs of material and labour, and that does limit how much we can do. It certainly had an impact on the current schemes and the funding available to fund new schemes within the capital programme too. Back a year ago, well, last February, Welsh Government produced the final 25/6 general capital funding settlement, which was 7.6 million, made up of 4.2 grant and 3.4 of supported borrowing. And those have been the bases of our proposals in this particular report, which went to Cabinet on the 4th of December. That was an increase on the funding available in the previous year. We obviously get caught up in timing sometimes with writing these reports. At the time of writing, we made the broad assumption that we would that capital funding would be flat, so that we would receive a £7.6 million of in the settlement for 26/7. However, we around the time of writing the report, we'd had the provisional settlement from Welsh Government, and that was £7.7 million, so marginally up, and naturally we'll use that figure in subsequent reports. There's a summary in the report about how the capital programme is funded. The total value of capital schemes over the next 5 years is forecast at £423 million. But there are some significant components to that programme. Just short of £80 million, Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and obviously ambitious £254 million in the Housing Improvement programme, given the discussion we've just had. And also just short of £12 million of new capital bids over the 5-year period. The funding table also highlights the unsupported borrowing requirement to implement the programme, £224 million, but the majority of that is in relation to the Housing Improvement programme. It doesn't fall on the council taxpayer, that falls on the tenants of our housing revenue account. Given the scarce capital financial resource available and the fact that much of the predicted future general capital funding from Welsh Government's already been allocated within the current 5-year programme, we've taken a similar approach to that we did last year in relation to capital bids. But as well as prioritising health and safety and regulatory legislative bids, we also sought to prioritise preventative bids. Further information is on Appendix 1B in the way in which we assess the bids. A bit about the process. Each directorate was asked to submit a list of potential capital bids indicating scheme name, cost, description, some considerations such as decarbonisation, links to the council's wellbeing objectives and annual delivery plan, and any potential revenue implications. And the directorates then prioritised their bids to take forward. They were shortlisted by the Insight Board in October, and for the shortlisted ones we then asked for full capital bid forms. And that's the major change that we brought in last year. Historically, at the start of the process, directorates completed full capital bids, and given the paucity of resources, that's not been a really fair process given the chances of having schemes going forward. So we've kept with the process that we introduced last year. The long list of capital bids, though, 46 of them, they're included in Appendix 3 for full visibility on the process. The recommendations of the Strategic Insight Board were then reviewed by Leader Chief Executive and myself. So it's proposed that new schemes, as just mentioned, just short of £12 million that are detailed in paragraph 2.4 of the report are included in the capital programme 2026-7 to 2031. And the bids that have been put forward for funding are included in Appendix 2 and detailed in Appendix 4. So there's a fair amount of detail in the report. Due to the urgent nature of bids requiring funding the shortage of internal funds, some of the funds will be needed to be funded from borrowing in the first instance. So the borrowing required to fund the bids is set out in paragraph 2.47, and that's £5 million over the next 5 years. The council's replacement reserve projections have been updated to take account of reimbursement calculations into the reserve, and it's requested to increase the budget and reprofile the scheme budget as set out in paragraph 2.26 of the report. Brief couple of words about next steps now. So after considering results of public consultation and the settlement from Welsh Government, an updated capital programme we presented to Cabinet in January, which we've seen. And alongside the revenue budget proposals that were published end of last week, these proposals will also be subject to that joint session with Scrutiny Committee members as part of our wider engagement and consultation exercise on the budget. Those will then go forward to towards the end of February to be presented to full council for final approval at the start of March. So that's all I was going to say introducing this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Questions and comments on this report? Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I'd like to focus my questions on road resurfacing, and I note Matt's comments about the priority being given to preventative bids. The reason I ask this is because within the past 24 hours, I was contacted about a pothole on the junction of Penland Road, or Leckwith Road, I think it is actually, and Greenway Close within Landock. And this is something that I receive, or inquiries like this are things that I receive on a frequent basis. And I'm sure that's the experience of other members of this committee as well. But when I then look at the report and I look at the potential funding for capital bids, resurfacing, asset renewal, that's set at £2 million a year. I appreciate that won't be the entire budget for resurfacing over the course of the financial year. But I do then have to ask, is this sufficiently ambitious? To give another example in my own ward of Landock Hill was resurfaced last year. It's a relatively small section of road, and the cost of that was £62,488.54. Now, when we consider the number of roads there are in the Vale of Glamorgan, many of which are much longer and more bigger as well than Landock Hill, the amount allocated doesn't look like that it will go very far. So my question really is, do more resources need to be allocated towards resurfacing? And secondly, what action is the council taking to ensure that prevention, when it comes to things like potholes and road surface deterioration, is prioritised?
Matt.
So certainly in the 25-6 programme, we did have some positive news on being able to support the resurfacing of our highways with a long-term view, and there was money from Welsh Government to fund the financing of those allocations for the next 2 years. So that money, the financing costs are actually in our revenue budget settlement. So we have been able to put some more money into the capital programme for our roads. Obviously, the what you're saying in terms of the capital programme is the preventative end of our highways maintenance work, as it makes much more sense to resurface rather than to patch potholes that are often only temporary fixes. So we're attempting to use the available resources that we have the best we can.
Thank you, Matt. Any follow-up, any questions or comments from anyone else? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Obviously, there's a number of things in the report, as you would expect, given that it extends over a number of years. I've got 3 points to raise. One relates to responsibility. So there's 1 point here. There's a mention of a footbridge near to Dingle Road, but nothing in relation to something new in relation to accessibility for Eastbrook. Who is actually responsible for making sure that people can cross bridges around trains? So that's the first question. And what responsibility do we have as a local authority? The second relates to the future. We're expecting Ysgol Gymraeg Bro Morgannwg to be fully subscribed in 2 or 3 years' time. And there's nothing I can see in particular relating to a second comprehensive school in Vale of Glamorgan. So what's the situation there in terms of planning for spend? And the third thing relates to a corporate joint committee. And there's a mention here of a contribution from Vale of Glamorgan, but it's not entirely clear initially how we benefit. So I would welcome any comments from Matt in terms of how this feeds back into the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for raising those points. I suspect I'll have to get back to you on all 3 of them outside the meeting. I do know, I would say, with the those footbridges over the railway lines, those are going to be challenging schemes to deliver. There will be difficulties around timing and working with the rail companies to make sure that work progresses to plan. But I'll pick up your point of the responsibility around access. The Welsh Comprehensive, and where there are discussions around that, but I'll need to go back to colleagues in learning skills to pick up that. And similarly on the Cardiff Capital Region, you'll have seen from the monitoring report some slippage of the programme in year. We're waiting on Cardiff Capital Region for details of their forward plan as well. But I'll pick up with them what our contributions, but the benefit of our contributions are going to be. I do have a meeting tomorrow morning with their Director of Finance and the other 151 areas, 151 officers from the region, and I'll take the opportunity to ask that question of them tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Matt.
Thank you. I will appreciate to have the responses. I know that there are plans underway in relation to the Welsh school, but I am concerned that if it doesn't appear in a capital strategy document extending over a number of years. So I would like to have some level of reassurance that this has been worked through, and I'm looking forward to seeing this in these sorts of documents going forward. Thank you.
Thank you both. Have we got any more questions or comments? No? Oh, can I just make one comment around home view? It would be nice to have some more information whenever possible regarding the business plan for this. I'm very aware that possibly couldn't be discussed within this meeting, but if any more information could be circulated to the committee around this bid would be greatly appreciated, if that's possible, Matt.
Yeah, noted.
Great, thank you. And barring it from anything else? No? Okay, can we ask that we note the report and move on? Can I have a seconder for that? I'll propose it this time. Thank you, Councillor Imogen. Barring dissent, we'll move on to the pay policy. So yes, item 7, any items which the chair have decided are urgent under part 1. Under this, we have a reference from the Cabinet on the pay policy for 26-27. On this one, I believe Laith is taking us through this. Good to have you with us.
Yes, hi there. Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah. Hi, committee. Good evening. Hope you can hear me.
All working fine. Thank you for being with us.
All right, thank you. So I don't think there's any officers now on the call, as I understand. I think I'm probably the only one left now. But that's good.
Sorry, Chair. Wait, just to clarify, let me just check that everyone else left. So before we proceed.
On my list, I think they're all gone because Tom just left us. Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure they could watch this back afterwards anyway, but we'll carry on. So you're quite right. We're now, as part of our next reporting period for the pay policy for 2026-27, and as part of the approval process, there's quite a number of meetings this report goes to. So it's already been to Cabinet here for resources scrutiny. It will then potentially go back to Cabinet if you've got any further comments, and then on to full council for ratification in March, ready to be published by the 31st of March 2026. So a bit of a journey this goes on to. It's a fairly, and again, you've seen this report a number of times. I can't believe that 12 months goes by so quickly. It's fairly standard reports that we have to follow certain guidelines as part of producing the pay policy. So I really wanted just to highlight a number of the sort of differences, I suppose, as part of this year's report, and just highlight some of the changes rather than running through all the information sort of there. So I am going to just jump straight to the appendix, which is the actual pay policy itself. As I said, it's fairly standard in terms of its introduction, its scope. The legislation hasn't changed in terms of the information that's included in there. Information relating to paragraph 4.3. Again, obviously, our pay changes every year, especially around national pay awards. Now, the pay award for 2025-26 basically indicated that we had to remove spinal point column 2 from our pay structure from April 2026. So what that means is not just us, it's the national pay structure across the UK for our single status staff in our grades 1 to 11. So what will happen is that staff under grades 1, 2 and 3, because we're removing the bottom sort of spinal point, will all shift up sort of an increment as part of the pay structure from April. And again, from our perspective, that is a positive story again, where we've done a lot of work around our pay structure since 2019. where we've tried to review some of the pay about our lowest paid workers, including the real living wage, which I'll come on to shortly. So we are doing some work at the moment, again, to move quite a number of staff sort of pay sort of increases with effect from April, and so on. There is obviously the National Pay Award that we're still awaiting details on, that will commence. Again, consultation has commenced. Again, but normally we don't hear that outcome, sometimes much later in the year. And when we do get the notification of the pay award, that then gets backdated to back to the 1st of April, and we provide obviously that uplift for everybody. So we said we got some initial work sort of around that, because of that removal of the lower spinal point for staff on 1st of April. I then wanted to move to, I'm going to jump a few paragraphs in a way, because we've updated some of the data, around the number of pupils we've got in schools, the housing stock, some of the information we've got just generally about the council. One of the major things I think, especially from last year, that we've come to report on is the council actually getting accreditation as part of the real living wage, which again, that's a real sort of plus, I think, for the council. One of now only 5 local authorities in Wales that have got accreditation to the Real Living Wage Foundation. So I said we even though we've been paying the real living wage to our staff and agency workers since 2022, we've actually gone the full process now and achieved that accreditation sort of process, which means that we're doing a lot more work around procurement as well in terms of our external suppliers as well. So again, with the new rate of £13.45 being introduced again by the Real Living Wage Foundation, we'll commence that payment also from 1st of April to coincide with the removal of spinal point 2 as part of the pay structure. So again, a lot of changes to pay at the moment, and the payroll team is going to be quite busy building up to that April deadline. So again, some positive news around the real living wage. No major changes again in terms of the report. We've updated the figures on 7.17 around the gender profile of officers. Again, updating the pay ranges, again, based on 2025-26 data, because again, we don't generally have next year's pay structure levels until much later in the year, which we then report probably next year's pay policy as well. And I think then the only other one I was going to sort of jump to is section 8 under the gender pay gap. Again, a fairly positive sort of story from that as well. So we're providing a table, basically, we're just keeping on going from when we started reporting it back in 2019, where we had a median sort of pay gap of 13.9%. And as at March 2025, which is the period where we report annually as well, that we're actually down to a median figure of 1.6%. So again, just a huge reduction in terms of trying to reduce our gender pay gap sort of figure as well, and again reducing the mean or average pay from 6.2% back in 2019 to 2.3% again in March 2025. So again, there's been lots of work again over the years. We introduced our new pay structure in 2019. That wouldn't come into effect in terms of the gender pay gap figures until 2020, which again, that showed a huge immediate reduction in that. And over the last sort of few years, we've been, working, with our pay structure. We've been, again, introducing the real living wage. There's also been, again, we can't take all the credit sometimes, but nationally, the pay awards have been given on the basis of flat sort of amounts of pay rather than the percentage increase. So if you consider if everyone had a £2,000 sort of flat pay rise, £2,000 for our lowest paid workers is a much higher percentage than a £2,000 sort of pay rise for our higher paid and chief officer sort of workers. So that's why, I suppose, to a certain extent, the gender pay gap is reducing on the basis that our lower paid have had significant sort of pay rises compared to our higher paid staff, and so on. So again, this is just a bit of an update as well. We're operating a median figure currently at 1.6%, and nationally, according to the ONS, the 2025 April figure is currently 6.9% as well nationally. So again, we're quite a significant sort of figure below that as well, which is good news. Looking at the other parts of the report, again, just updated figures really around the pay relatives in section 12. And again, they haven't changed on the basis that we had a percentage pay increase rather than a flat rate last year, which means the ratio figures have stayed stable. But again, they're fairly consistent with the local authority setting in terms of ratios against our lowest paid workers and our chief officer sort of grouping. So I didn't want to go on any further, really. I think hopefully the report speaks for itself, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from councillors, please? Councillor Emma Goodjohn.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you ever so much, Laith, and to the team for this work you've done, especially on narrowing the gender pay gap. That's really welcomed. With my equalities hat on, this is something that's very important. And the living wage, the real living wage is very important, as you say, to the staff that are paid a lower rate. So thank you. Thanks again.
Okay. Pleasure.
Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much. Similar points to those from Councillor Goodjohn there in relation to the importance of the real living wage and the impact that this will have on staff at the bottom of the pay scale. It was also good to hear from Laith the explanation in terms of how we've reduced the discrepancy in relation to gender and how the increase in flat rates has a bigger impact than a percentage over the last couple of years because of the number of people working for the council, number of women working for the council and where they are on the scale. So that was interesting. This is a report that we receive on an annual basis, so we're familiar with the content. But one point I would like to understand a little bit more, and perhaps Laith won't be able to respond, but there is mention of the number of senior officer posts, number of people being employed on those grades, and I just wasn't entirely sure what the difference internally was between OM1 and OM2 within the senior pay grade. In OM1 is 33 and only 4 in OM2 were all women. So I just wanted to have some sort of understanding in terms of which type of roles sit at those levels and why they haven't been combined over the years. I don't know whether Laith can explain that. Thank you.
Faith.
I shall do my best, Councillor Dr. Johnson. So you're quite right in terms of the grade structure between the operation manager level 1 and level 2. There is a slight salary difference. So OM1s are paid the higher level and OM2 just slightly lower. And in fact, actually, the grades do overlap. So the OM1 grading structures, which I think is in the report, is around the sort of 61 to 67,000, and the OM2 salary scale, I think, still goes up to around 64, 65. So there is a slight overlap. those 4 posts generally relate to, as I understand it, sort of project management type roles within sort of a number of functions within the council. So I think on that basis, because they may not have the same level of responsibilities, especially around staff management, which is probably why they haven't moved into that next level of OM1. I'm happy to take me for an example, but again, I've got a team of over 35, 40 staff, various functions from HR, payroll, occupational health, and so on. So the broad aspect of those roles that get taken into account and put at that OM1 level. Sometimes, even though you'll be operating at a high level in terms of chief officer level, you may not have that amount of broad responsibility and staff management, which is why those numbers are posted just, I suppose, slightly lower at those OM2 levels.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you both. No other comments or questions? Then I will also assume we don't have any comments to send back to Cabinet then. Fine. In that case, then Cabinet will deem this item as approved and send on to full council, where it will be finally debated and possibly agreed. In that case, can I have a hand to move and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Emma Goodjohn. And Councillor Norman as well. Thank you. Okay, on that basis, I have no urgent items under Part 2 or any other urgent items under Part 1. In this case, this meeting is closed. Thank you all.